or my collection, Focal Point, no longer forthcoming. And I think in honor of Teresa, I will also read one that is new-ish and unpublished. I will start with the very first poem in this collection, which I think is a good intro to it. Point at which parallel waves converge and from which diverge. Researcher, prevention won't save my life, tweets a patient with metastatic cancer. I'm reminded of my mother. Why don't you want to study cancer? When I expressed interest in HIV. In the hospital, call from a professor. My mother clapping once, then silence. The roommate 30 years her senior, who called my voice lovely, who called my mother lucky, whom I resented because she outlived my mother. Nights at a microscope, in a dark room where the lights turn off after 10, sitting too still, turning a knob just so to focus on the right field of cells. The 800 mice I've sacrificed this year, injecting cancer, harsh medicine into their soft, warm bodies, hating them for biting me, but understanding, stroking their white fur in apology, covering cages with paper so they can't watch their sisters die. But I can, and I see my mother in those graying eyes I refuse to donate because how would she see? And I think how cruelly futile all this erratically focused empathy, how brutal to learn why I couldn't save what I couldn't save. Next, I will read a shortish poem, I guess warning about language in this poem. This is First Spring 2011. Everyone I love is dead or dying. The sun shines garishly bright. The ice is melting, things are growing, birds are fucking in the sky. It's too cold and too warm, and the earth keeps turning. Pink flowers burst from bare branches, too eager to last the spring. They look absurd, showing off as if beauty still matters. I want to tell them, stop wasting their sweetness. So I guess I should mention that I wrote most of these poems when I was doing my PhD in cancer biology right over here at UCSF. And I lost my mother shortly before that. I won't read just about that, but I will next read a few more of my sciencey poems from the lab. So this first one is laboratory observations. A man in the lab next door shuffles his feet when he walks, hooded eyes gazing downward. Poor unhappy grad student, I thought. But then I saw him rolling in with a stroller, undaunted by the lime green diaper bag on the handle, unashamed of the floral pattern that makes some men squirm. He looked at ease for once, publications forgotten, experiments on hold, too busy gazing downward, caressing petal fingers, parading about the lab with his baby in his arms. And then I'm going to read a couple of the series of biology lesson poems. I sort of structured some of the first parts of this book as like a poetic lab notebook. And so these biology lesson poems came out of like learning how to do cell culture, how to grow cells in a dish when I was first starting grad school. Biology lesson 1. Cells need touch. Isolated cells wither. float away in a blood-red sea. Biology lesson 2. Too much touch stifles. Even the toughest cells die, wanting room to breathe. Here, I'm going to read the poem that is not in this book. So sorry, I'm gonna have to read off my phone because I don't print anything. And the reason I am reading this is because it is titled Borderline, which seems very appropriate. And it's kind of a draft that I wrote as a series of poem letters to one of my friends during the wildfires in 2018 and 19. So I haven't really gone back to it since then. So here I go, looking at this thing that I haven't looked at in a couple of years. This is Borderline. On the boundary of what is acceptable, valid, or normal. July 1st, 2018. Does the sky look yellow where you are? Wildfires, I tell myself, but I can't shake the heaviness of this new slant of light. November 8th, 2018. Another fire in California. Ashes rise and scatter, so the air swells with it, thick in my throat like mourning. Waking, I try to cough out remnants from the last. The 2018 wildfire season was the deadliest recorded in California. 1.8 million acres burned. There are 108 million acres in California. Hours south, fire at the Borderline Country Bar, a place of solace for survivors. And as they raced for safety, many of them thought, not again, after last year in Las Vegas. Some not so lucky twice. I remember my school friends liked country music, hadn't thought to ask after them, our friendships so long faded. Still, slight relief, guilt, when I don't recognize names. There were 340 mass shootings in the US in 2018. There are 365 days in a year. November 8th, 2019. I spent last week in Mexico for Dia de los Muertos, more like Entera Semana de Muertos, week of the living mingling with death. Add a letter, entera, is a cognate for inter or bury. Here, what is buried rises each day, an entire grave site uncovered, bodies posed in a museum, another temple emerging, sacrificial basins still flecked with blood. What we learn repeatedly about the ancients, how violence normalized across millennia won't stay hidden. The Aztecas, the missing 43, Niguala, neither the first nor last. There were 417 mass shootings in the US in 2019. There are still 365 days in a year. What it's like to live in a country where death is normalized. And it makes me sad that that is still so relevant. And also grateful for all the rain this week. One of my friends from college wrote like a really stunning review of my book, and something that I've been thinking about all day is how grief starts out as such an individualized thing and then expands like a blueprint for mourning all of the many things. So I will veer more into that in my next few poems. Next, I'm going to read Two Cures. One is to heal the wound, restore the body to a scar, a mark of neither quite past nor present. The other is to preserve in salt, let the flesh wither and toughen so it withstands like a pillar. To cure a thing is to remove it from time. Am I cured? I am so salty. What if there is no cure? Only the moment I looked back, how my heart withered and brined. I'll take a look at the time, but I will read 3 more. Next is magnificent things. In an ocean of ashes, islands of order, patterns making themselves out of nothing. I can't show you how deep it goes. Each picture is a detail of the previous one blown up, and so on forever. From Thomas Stoppard in Arcadia. Last month, a lone peacock flared his tail as I photographed a rose in his enclosure. Magnificent things flailing in the whistling April wind. A memory of years ago, my mother calling out, "Cao Liang, pretty bird, won't you open your tail?" A peacock's tail is a sign of good things to come. In her lifetime, it never happened. I watched the peacock turning, a silent waltz in the grass, patterned tail fanned out, waving like a skeleton hand. How delicate the feathers, tattered strings of a sail struggling against the wind. How flimsy their magnificence. The warmest I felt since my mother died was last night with you. The ocean sunset behind us, its iridescence caught in the patterns of my half-awake dreams. Fragmented images from Arcadia, a final waltz, a magnificent fire, fractal perfection of a rose. Rediscovery of meaning, no substitute for the initial loss. A repertoire of tiny tragedies lost to the ashes. I wept as the clock ticked forward, burning moment down to memory. It was always a ghost in the making. In 9 minutes, you'll be another year older. You miss the moment asleep beside me, adrift in magnificent oblivion. Already, I miss you, not as you are, but a future in which you are not. Inevitable. There's a weird mole on your back. It could be a year or 5, 20, 52. I'm always waiting. Did you make an appointment yet? In the dark, I rehearse my slow waltz with loss. I know the steps by heart. Okay, I'm gonna finish with just one last poem, and this is the last one I wrote. And it is more of thinking about California being on fire. Contingencies. Everywhere, somewhere is burning, and it's too late to look back. I wake up in the dark, smell smoke, so familiar, I don't think twice. Some nights I wake with a start. Here, look at all these photos I haven't scanned. Clear my throat of dust again, these days inescapable. I imagine my lungs black like a chimney. Think of city haze so thick, it could not be measured. The scale of these days, beyond conceiving. How the ancients imagined us. What it means to be immeasurable. I want to move to the mountains and breathe, which is to say, I want to be anywhere but here. I would build myself a nest atop the tallest tree. say hello to the grizzlies and lost small birds. I would trace the stars' slow fire path into my palm like a poem. Let this be enough. I would be the mountain and the stars, be that immovable and that transient. Thank you very much.
How's the sound in the back? Good? Cool. Well, I'm super, super honored to be following Jenny. It's just really such a gift. And I kind of wish she could come up and reread that set again, just to let it sink in again. But the good news is you can reread it by getting her book, which I'm planning to do tonight. I want to thank all of you for being here. You're all very beautiful. It's wonderful to be in person. I'm about a third of the way through my tour, but this is my first in-person stop. So this is particularly special. Thank you for being here. And this is also kind of a homecoming because I was in Oakland for about 10 years. And like Car mentioned, I'm an MFA grad from Mills College. We've got some Mills College representation in the front here and in the back. One of them I'm married to. So thank you for being here, and thanks to the people who are watching at home. And thanks to Amanda for introducing me to Jenny so that we could read together. And I definitely encourage you to come back here on Tuesday to hear her amazing new book, Requeening. I had the pleasure of reading with her last week, and it's a really gorgeous book. So you're in for a treat if you come back. So one of the things that I've learned from reading with Amanda is to give a little bit of a spiel before I just dive in. It's a skill that I'm developing over time, how to frame my work instead of just letting it all hit you at once. One of the reasons I was interested in reading with Jenny is because of the interweaving of ecological concerns and personal concerns. So I'm really glad that she ended on the poem that she did. I think that's a good place for me to pick up. And one of the things that I've been saying about this book is, in order to heal the earth, we need to heal ourselves. And in order to heal ourselves, we need to heal the earth. So this book is certainly interested in our place in the ecological web. And it's also interested in illusion, specifically the illusion of separation from parts of our mind, from other parts of our mind, ourselves from each other, and then humans from the earth. No matter how much we pretend, we can't actually conquer it, and it wouldn't be a good idea. So those ideas around trauma then in the book have to do with that separation. And the last thing I'll say is that the poems are not titled in the book, but the sections are. And just to give you kind of a taste of the progression and the transformation that happens. We start with of the dead, and then our own worst consequence, disenthrall, so there's some sort of breaking of a spell, and finally lay down your rigid creation. I came here to conjure you. What may I say? Anything, all of it. Friction on the flint, many-armed agent of entropy. What wrath would I risk reaping? What disowning? Who bore me to the shore, pressed me under, dragged there, ragged gasps? If I am already orphaned, why fear orphaning? This splintered boom in my hand. I woke a forest. What sounds serene has a rotten floor. I could dress it up, candles on the sundered trunks, silk scarves, and cut flowers. But you arrive, already cleaving. A riven nausea in the cambium, some needle-leafed private anguish. The canopy swoons. You could hypnotize yourself a savior, nourish a legacy in your suckers and saplings, bank on a lightning-struck triple crown. Topple early and end it. And one of the reasons the first section is titled Of the Dead is because in general, but in my family in particular, I think that it's frowned upon to speak ill of the dead. And in my family in particular, I think it's frowned upon to speak of the dead at all. And there's a kind of imprisonment in that state of affairs. And so I'm glad that Jenny brought up grief as well, because one of the things that I've been interested in is how grief can be transformative while trauma is very imprisoning, and it goes in a circle. And grief, if we're lucky, we might not choose it, but it can help us move forward and out of trauma. But that involves doing something very dangerous, which is sometimes speaking about the dead. I lift the ban. If you are gone, you will speak your own language. You broke my mother, and so you broke me. Lost in the thicket of your misfortune. Sharp, brittle branches, sticky with bird shit, dusted with gray down. If I had a child, she was already mine. We did it backward, skipping time. The mouth of the Duwamish smells like creosote, gravel yard, freight train on a rusted trestle. We lashed a raft together and set off paddling. I wasn't yet born. The water dried salty, reliable, cold. I looked back and you were unqueened. Sudden, without ceremony, afraid of me. When did our tormentors become so frail? Pockmarked shell fragment, grain of sand. And the epigraph for the second section, I feel inclined to evoke one of my idols, the late Lucy Brock-Broido. And I always think of her when I give a reading because she was afraid to drink water in front of an audience. And so she'd turn around and drink with her back to the audience. And I still think about that. I just don't bring up my water at all. There's no way. But the line comes from her poem, Bodhisattva. I was cowering at the circumference of your heart, howling. Until the magnetic pole reverses, no amount of trying will summon you a mother. Until the Arctic ice returns to its sheets and the calving thunder cracks backward. Haul yourself out, one frozen leg at a time. And this poem comes from a million years ago, when I was an undergrad living in New York City. And somehow one fragment of a stanza that I wrote all that time ago made it into this book. From the corpse-sized pillar, Noguchi called forth rings of a worm, strikes like sticks of dynamite. How far the gale carried us to get tangled in our own string. A whole continent, a separate ocean. In Queens, I am a stone, carved to let water run down. My heart has stopped. The stones envy my stillness. The branches sang me silent. Papery maples skittered on the window. Cutting too hard, too fast, spurs a reaction in kind. My creator topped them all. 30 winters thrust through summer. I clenched my swallowed octaves. You twirled me a crackling helicopter, chased me a birch twig broom. It wasn't all bad, was it? Didn't we in the slant light have fun? Now we're getting ready to start breaking this book. Lured back, I spun myself a shiny aluminum wing. But in the afternoon, she put on a new face. Those you love will evaporate before you. Leave their slack-jawed, wind-up bodies lying in the yard. Nicotine-stained filters reeking in the kitchen garbage. Here is the next moment of your life. You spent it in my crooked song. I can't speak for anyone who's endured trauma except myself. But I'll say that one of its traps can be wanting to extract an apology. We could move forward if only fill in the blank impossible request from the other person. And so part of the breaking of the spell for me, in any case, has been relinquishing that apology, which is no small feat. In the end, there was no end. You limp along, coated in ash, glowing like radiation or starlight. I won't know which until you go. Besides, they are the same. So long I chased the resolution, how to make concrete feel remorse, swifts change course, bulbs will themselves not to bloom. You will leave one more unfinished row. The same road awaited. Someday came to set out walking. A whirling turnkey toy in the night circus. One Polaroid replacing the hours no man or child would save you. Your weather came to waste you. How I yearned to claim a new ecosystem, that dry stand of beetle kill pine. I inherited not a house, but the memory of a house. The stranger camouflaged, stretched shadow before breaching the cellar, white paint grit stained. We cannot ever be alone. Broad day, rain mixed with snow. No harm, no me for 2 generations. No place I could touch except in sleep to say at last, but I didn't live here. So my dragon was a paper lantern, never even wild. When the moth-eaten phantoms tire, may we choke ourselves awake. Something that Jenny and I have in common that we haven't talked about, but that's coming through in our poems, is the early loss of a parent. So my father was killed when I was 23, and that's sort of the big trauma among the smaller ones in the book. And my last book, Sped, which was published by Sidebrow, which is a small San Francisco press, 2/3 of which are here tonight, and I'm very honored. My last book was very much about him, and in this one, it's a little bit more expansive and a little bit more cosmic, but he still makes appearances. Rushing circulation shakes you. You had a father and will never have him again. Forgetting the northern constellations, equations you faltered through but did not comprehend. Plain vanilla ice cream, worn in flannel, white-crowned sparrow. I'm going to read a couple more poems, and then our books are available and we're available to sign our books. And I would love to hug everyone I haven't hugged yet who turned out tonight. It really just, I can't express enough how special it is to see you all here and to be here tonight. It's just very magical. I feel very grateful to all of you for being here. I hope that our readings have piqued your interest in our books, but either way, I hope you will show Green Apple some love. They clearly have lots of choices for you. And I think I've come to appreciate even more so during the pandemic how important this kind of community is. And I'm saying that as a pretty committed hermit. But there are other places that sell books, but they don't do this. So I really encourage people to get your books at the places that make the magic. Whatever you do, the wheels will break away. Tomorrow they rusted out yesterday. You slept with your not love, waiting for the 11th floor. Wind River running green. What is a family? An evening your roots divide. Cigarette smoke and shouts wafting up from the bars below. One day, history runs out. The schematic alone, more than everything you ever toted. The thought of your acacia grazing unfamiliar atmosphere. What dark energy you bring to expand the universe is not yours to inventory. No more testimony. Thanks so much, everyone.
Going just a little bit longer for these.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you so much, Jenny. This is it's really special to be here with you all. I think this is, I have a personal investment here, but I think it's a really special space, but like my investment is like from this and like from poetry, and like that's what makes it great, and like y'all make it great. So I'm really glad to get to be here together with you folks, and also with you on the internet. Thank you. We do have books. Please make yourselves comfortable. We're open for a little while longer, and these two poets have graciously accepted the invitation to sign your books. So you can grab those at the front and you can bring them back up here. Just please don't forget to pay for your books before you leave. That does happen sometimes, so it's worth mentioning. Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
No,
we're a little bit over time, so I think the reading is like really perfect. And if you have questions, you guys have answers. You can ask them personally. But thank you for the reminder. Oh, I want to say too that Roxanne Beth Johnson was supposed to join us this evening, but unfortunately she was feeling under the weather. But we do have her book too, if you want to take a look at it. And I recommend that you do. Her collection, Black Crow Dress, is really great. So that's at the front as well. These two poets collections are at the front. Many other books. Thank you for being here, and good night.
Yes, and you've gotten a lot of practice. Yeah, no, it was just really fun.
I always think of you from the where you got it from me, so it was like cross and did you say that? I do not remember that. Oh, you were like, you're gonna do that. Yeah.